Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm doing my April reads wrap up, and I was fortunate to have the chance to read 5 books this past month. And I'm going to do a short summary of each book, and I'll also link my full review in the descriptions down below if you have a bit more time to watch the rest of my videos. Before I summarize each book that I read in April, I always appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, if you can give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment if you've read any of the books that I'm going to summarize, and if you have any suggestions for me to read for the month of May, comment down below. I'm always open to adding books to my to-be read. The 5 books I read this month were all pretty good. The lowest star I gave was a 3, but I had 2 5s and 2 4s. And also by chance that all 5 of the books that I read in April, not intentional, were all written by women, and all the protagonists in the books were really strong, inspiring women with very different stories and struggles in life. So I just wanted to add that intro in before I go into each book that I read. The first book I read in April was Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, which is biography. I gave this book a 4 out of 5, and I think if you had a chance to read this book, I would actually recommend you listening to the audiobook, because Tina Fey, as she's a comedian, was really funny when I read the book, so I really wish I had listened to it because I'm sure she would have been hilarious to listen to. So the book is quick, it's easy, it's entertaining, and Tina shares her story of her upbringing, how she got into improv in Chicago, how she got to SNL, and how she eventually, created 30 Rock, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and it's just very inspiring to see her story and seeing her struggles being a female comedian in the industry as well. The second book I read is Still Alice by Lisa Genova, which is also a major movie production if you want to watch. And the book I gave is a 5 out of 5. Even though it's fictional, Lisa Genova is a Alzheimer's speaker, and she's very well educated in the subject, and I believe she wrote Alice based on a bunch of patients or people who struggle with Alzheimer's, to kind of share the story of what it's like to live with Alzheimer's. So the story, we meet Alice. She is a professor at Harvard, and over time she kind of forgets these little things that even someone that's young like me and you wouldn't really think about. But then one day she goes for a run, which she does every day, and she's only like maybe 2 blocks from home, and she can recognize everything she's seeing, but for some reason she just can't compute how to get home, which is very jarring because she's ran the route every day for 20 years. So she gets diagnosed, she's only in her early 40s, and it turns out she has early onset Alzheimer's. So this book covers a span of 2, almost 3 years to see Alice's deterioration with the disease and how it affects her career as a professor, her marriage, and also her relationship with the 3 kids. The book is, I would say, pretty heartbreaking, but there are still moments that bring a smile to your face, especially seeing her relationships with her adult children. The third book I read is called The Startup Wife by Tamina Anam. This was unfortunately my only 3 out of 5 book. So the book talks about Asha, who is a child of Bangladeshi immigrants, and she has this idea to build an app and an algorithm where it creates the idea of social media mesh with rituals and connecting strangers all around the world through shared rituals. So her husband is a spiritual worker, and they band together to build this app. And this book talks about the main character, Asha's struggle with being a executive in a tech company, which is mostly male dominated, and how her struggle with balancing being a boss in the tech industry, but also balancing her relationship with her husband. So this book only gave it 3 because I felt the relationship was very, I couldn't relate to their love at all. But I think this book is still really good if you're in tech, especially if you struggle with your career and also, being, I guess, wearing the pants in your marriage or relationship, and how that works when you mix romance and business. I do want to jump in to say that I don't have any of the books to hold because I am usually a library reader. But my next review, the Paris Library, do have the actual copy because the book club in wanted to read this book, and unfortunately it was like the waitlist was number 200 at the library, so I did have to buy a copy of the book, but I do want to say that if you live in a city where there is a library and you're able to, please check it out, because the library is a great resource to get a lot of free books, and you just never know what you might find. A lot of my books I read, I just get based off browsing through the bookshelf. It's always really fun instead of always going off of Goodreads or what people post. So I definitely recommend that. My fourth book, as I was saying before, is The Paris Library by Janet Scicilian Charles. And this book, I gave it a 4 out of 5. It is a dual timeline historical fiction book, and it's set in Paris, specifically at the American Library during the Nazi occupation during World War II. So this book talks about the importance of the American Library staying open during the occupation, and it talks about the women and other fellow workers at the American Library, how they work hard to read books to injured soldiers, how they secretively deliver books to people, because during the time of war, books serve as a I guess like a form of escapism and also hope and also distraction. So this book was really good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 overall, but I do have to say there were times that it dragged quite a bit, and up until the last 70 pages I would have given it 3, but the last 70 pages it really ramps up in the plot. So overall I gave this book a 4 out of 5, and I really enjoyed the dual timeline. So you can see Odile, who was in her early 20s during World War II in France, and how she changes in her later life in the 1980s, where the dual timeline is set, I believe it is Minnesota, and how, or somewhere in the Midwest, and how she becomes this very lively young woman in her 20s to this recluse in her 70s. So it's kind of too cool to piece together how Odile changes during the decades between World War II and her time in the US. And the last book I read in April is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuawa. So this book is a 5 out of 5. It is a reread for me in the future. I cannot wait when I can reread it again, once I kind of forget the story and kind of jump back into it again. So this book, we follow the story of a young Palestinian woman who marries Zun, gets abandoned by her husband, and because of the culture there, she is kind of seen as not worthy as a divorced woman. So she unfortunately becomes an escort, and she moves between Kuwait and Jordan, and eventually she goes back to Palestine. And this book was just so amazing because it made me learn a lot about what it means to be Palestinian, the diaspora in that area of the world, and also gave me a new perspective on what the good guys are in the war. I said in my full review, which I'll link down below, that growing up as a Canadian, you always think the US are the good guys and they have reasons to invade the Middle East. That's justifiable, but this book just shows a different perspective, and it also shows how someone in the Middle East can become a radical person politically, because they just want to survive and they're just fighting for what's theirs. So this book was great, and I really recommend it. Thank you for sticking to the end of this video. Those were the 5 books that I got to read in the month of April. If you read any of the books, I'd love to hear what you thought about them down in the comments below. And as always, if you can subscribe and hit the like button, I will always appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time, and have a happy month of reading for May. Bye!